The donor was a 26-year-old woman who had hacked her unfaithful husband and his lover to death, then chopped them up and fed them to her dogs. She had been sentenced to death the previous October, but her sentence had been commuted to life without parole. Hunter hadn't told her who would be the recipient, but he had given her a written guarantee that her sentence would be reduced to an ordinary life sentence and she would be paroled quietly after serving 10 years. She was brought to the White House in a sealed van and anaesthetised before being transferred to the craft along with the operating team and the entire operating theatre. Dr. Macmillan had wanted to transfer the patient to hospital, but Ramu was adamant that no way could she leave the craft. The operation was a success, and 24 hours later, with the area around the White House still sealed off, Ramu's wife rose from her bed and greeted her host. "You recovered remarkably quickly, Mrs. Ramu," said the President. She laughed and replied, "We Pleiadians always do." He blushed involuntarily. "I hope you'll stay a while and allow me to show you both the sights. We don't get many tourists in Washington, at least not from the Pleiades." She smiled sweetly and said, "I'm afraid that will not be possible, James Hunter, but my husband would like to speak to you now, alone. He will explain." "Of course," said the President, as Ramu opened the door and Justin came out into the corridor. "James," he said, "come with me," and closing the door behind him, he led the President to the control cabin while his wife returned to her bed. They arrived in the cabin, which in spite of the discs being outwardly totally opaque, looked out onto the White House lawn through several wide portholes. "James," said Ramu, "you have been very hospitable and understanding." "Well, obviously there are many things we'd like to ask you, but I think it's clear from the way you contacted us that you only landed here out of necessity. It wouldn't be right to take advantage of such circumstances." "You're correct," said Ramu, "although necessity is an understatement. Desperation is a far more appropriate word. As you are probably aware, there is an understanding between the more advanced members of the Cosmic Federation that primitive civilizations, that includes yours I'm afraid, are not to be tampered with. They are to be left to find their own way and to develop their own technologies come what may. I am honour bound to adhere to this code. Yet from the little that I know of your world, it is obvious to me that your civilization is in deep crisis. You are rapidly destroying your environment and even more rapidly consuming scarce resources. I came to you as a stranger in need, and like the Good Samaritan, you took the cloak off your back and shielded me from the storm." James Hunter blushed slightly, and Ramu continued, "Forgive me if I mix my metaphors. My comprehension of your languages is far from perfect, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say." It sounded like "thank you," but Ramu obviously had more in mind, for he continued, "I am bound as I am not to interfere in the destiny of your planet. I am bound even more to honour your unselfish friendship." He walked over to a built-in cupboard in the cabin wall, waved his palm over it, and the door opened magically. Removing a large cylinder which resembled a gun and paint tin, he walked over to the desk and placed it gently on the top. Then he returned to the cupboard and took out something resembling an A4-sized plastic folder. "Your gift to a stranger in need was life. This," he said, "is my gift to you." "Thank you very much," said the President. What is it?" Ramu smiled. "In your tongue you would call it a cold solar cell." "Cold solar cell?" "Yes." Ramu removed the top of the cylinder and said, "You pour the fuel in here and it breaks down, giving off electricity. This is a small model, but you can use the blueprint to make larger ones." He tapped the folder. "I see," said the President. "What fuel does it use?" "Anything organic. On my planet we keep batteries of these things at sewage farms." "Sewage?" "Yes. Provided the fuel is liquid or mostly liquid and contains carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, it will emit electricity. The cell replenishes itself from trace elements in the fuel, so it will last about 50 Earth years, after which it must be replaced. One this size will generate enough energy to run 9 or 10 13-amp plugs continuously, which is probably sufficient for the average household." "Oh, easily," said the President. "And what happens to the fuel?" "It is broken down into water and salts. The water evaporates, the salts can be spread on the land or turned into animal feed." "And it needs sunlight?" "Not direct sunlight. The light of an ordinary room is sufficient. All the technical data and specifications are in the manual. It may sound as though it violates the law of conservation of energy, but it doesn't. It's just something rather simple that your scientists have overlooked." "I don't know what to say," said James Hunter. "One word of warning. This must be used for the benefit of all mankind. If it is, it will solve your energy and environmental problems until your species is ready to join mine in the conquest of space. If it is not, it will cause bitterness, hatred, social unrest and even war. Oh, believe me, Ramu, this is something which will be used to benefit all mankind, I swear. Future generations will make you a saint. Ramu laughed. Heck, they'll probably make me a saint. This time the President laughed. The idea of St. James of the White House appealed to him greatly. Then it was all over. The alien departed as suddenly as it arrived, leaving no trace of his ever having been. As the disc disappeared into the sky, James Hunter's thoughts turned immediately from the wondrous device Ramu had given him to the more pressing matter of covering up the alien's visit. This was something he had discussed with his advisory council while the surgeons were performing the operation. It would be out of the question for the truth to be revealed to the world. In the first instance, it would probably cause an international panic. In the second, who would ever believe it? Ramu had gone and left no trace of his ever having been here. True, they had filmed the craft, but Hollywood could do wonders with film nowadays. No mere film, however convincing, however well authenticated, would be sufficient proof of extraterrestrial contact. As he set about instructing his internal and external security and the media about what line they should take, he all but forgot the magic free power device the alien had given him. It was shut up in a small room at the back of the White House. It wasn't until the following week that he mentioned it to Colonel South. The Colonel was intrigued and asked him if he believed it did everything Ramu said it could. Well, I was certainly impressed at the time, said the President. But heck, a guy drops out of the sky and says, here's a free source of energy for you, you'd be impressed too. We'd better try it out, Mr. President, just you and me. I'll arrange for someone from the Pentagon lab to come over, but I would suggest you mention it to no one in the meantime, including the First Lady. Heck no, he said. That was the last thing on my mind. The following day, an electronics engineer attached to the Pentagon's Research and Development Department came over, and the three men examined the device in minute detail together. The engineer had it up and running in half an hour, and in another hour had figured out how it worked. Laughing to himself, he said, Mr. President, this is so simple that it's a wonder no one has thought of it before, on this planet anyway.